Hi, in this video, I'm going to walk you through on how to generate a HTML file using Jest. What is Jest? Jest is a JavaScript testing frameworks or a test runner for our code. It is a library for creating, running, and stretching tests before we write the code. As you can see here, I have an employee test JS file that's construct a test for our employee class. As you can see, I write the const employee require employee. That means I am calling the file employee that is in the lib folder. So to execute the file inside that, or the code inside that file. And as you can see, I write some tests to create an object. Our test should have a pass two arguments. The first one is a string, a logical string that explain or show what we want to do. And another arguments is the const employee or the object that we are targeting. And now if I'm going to run on my terminal the npm test, so this process is called TDD, that is test driven development. So if we are using the Jest or testing the Jest, we have to write a code for testing, and we have to test that code and it should fail first. But if here, because I already created all the codes and passed the test, so if I run the npm test on my terminal, it will say all the tests were passed because I haven't uncommented all the constructor files. So as you can see here, it's all passed: the manager test, intern test, GS test, engineer test, and employee test. Now if I'm going to go to my employee JS file and I'm going to uncomment or to comment this constructor file here, this employee test will going to fail. So if we test that, npm run test, it's still because I haven't saved, I'm sorry. So now we save that and we uncomment, or we remove that constructor file to pass the employee test JS. So if we run now the run npm test, we should see that our employee test JS would fail. As you can see here, there's a red color. That means if we will go to our manager test failed, everything failed. You know what, even if it's our intern, it's all like open, if we pass, it cannot pass because our employee JS is the main root of our file or project. So the intern, the engineer, and manager failed too because it was just extended file to our employee JS file. And now if I'm going to uncomment this constructor file and if I run the test, it should pass the employee test JS. And you know why? Because we create a constructor file to pass the test. So now we're going to run test and it should be, we have failed to save again, I'm sorry. So if we run this, it should pass the test. So as you can see, employee test has passed. It's the same to work with engineer test JS, manager test JS, and intern test JS. The main thing is these three tests is using an extended file or extended function, because in our engineer test we need to mail the email, the ID, the name, and there's a special characters that we need to get from that engineer, and that is the role and the GitHub username. So if we're going to go to our test.js engineer test, so I have written here, I also call again the engineer file to be executed, or the target file, and then I write here some tests to get the username, the GitHub username of the engineer that is required on my challenge, to add more information to the engineer, and to add more information also to the intern, and to add more information about the manager. So as you can see here, I have written a test to get the GitHub username of the engineer that will be added to our name, ID, and email of that certain employee. And we're adding also the role of an engineer. So as you can see, we write here, initialize the role engineer that should be given to this certain employee. And now we are going to go to our engineer.js file. And as you can see here, if I uncomment this constructor file, our test would be failed. And this is how the Jest frameworks is working. You need to create first the tests for a certain code before writing the code, so that if we have pictured out how to write the code and then the test failed and it will pass it, that means our code, we write the code correctly. So if we're going to save here and we will run this in npm run test on our terminal, we should expect that the engineer test.js would fail. So as you can see here, our employee test has passed because we already passed some constructor file or for that test. And here, as you can see, our engineer test.js had failed. You know why? It's because we haven't passed any constructor file to pass the test, because we uncommented here, or we commented here, we comment out the constructor file. So now we're going to uncomment this so that we will pass the test that we have written for the engineer to get the GitHub username. And as you can see here, I also call again the employee, the main root of that employee of that file. And then I have written here a class engineer extend employee. That means that I am extending the employee information for that engineer to add this GitHub username. And as you can see here, I have a methods here. What is a methods? That is like git role, GitHub. That means that method is to execute a set of instruction associated with the class. So this is our class engineer, and we need to get the role of that certain employee, and then we need to get the GitHub of that certain employee or the engineer. And now we are calling the module exports engineer, so that file should be executed and written to our HTML page. Now we are going to save this, and as you can see, we will run again the Jest or the npm test, and we should expect that the engineer test will pass. And we run that, and as you can see, all is green, and here is our engineer test pass. So it goes in the top. That means that is the current test that we are running on. And now the same with the intern and our manager JS information or file. If we go to our manager test, I'm also calling again the manager file here to be executed or linked with our test. And then I need the manager's more information like the office number, the role also. So I have a test here. I have written here a test to get the office number of that certain manager. And then I need the role to add. So I'm using here as again, so we don't need to repeat again the name, ID, and email to get that. So we just need the office number of that manager to add in the employee information. So now we're going to our manager JS. And as you can see here, I'm also again calling the main root of that file, the employee, to add this information, this office number, to the class manager or to the manager, to the employee called manager. So I'm using here class manager extend employee. That means that this additional information should be added to that employee called manager. And if you can see here, I have a methods get role and then get office. So, and then I'm calling again module expert manager to execute that file or to write that file. Now we're going to save this. So if, as you can see, if we're going to uncomment to comment out this and run. So in Jest and test-driven development, our process should be failed first, write a test, and then it should failed, and then write a code to pass or constructor file to pass the test, and then refactor. So if we're going to run, save again this, I've always forget that. Let me see, clear this. If I'm going to run this, then the manager test will fail. So let's see. It's running PM test. So as you can see, here the employee test has passed, but the engineer test has failed. Is that the way I say it? No, here it is. I already cleared that, but it doesn't clear. As you can see here, the engineer test JS pass, the intern test pass, the employee test, but our manager test had failed. And because we commented out the constructor file that will pass this test. Now if we're going to uncomment this file or this constructor file to pass the test, our manager test JS should pass. So now we will go again and run this in PM run test. And as you can see, still, because I didn't save, I'm sorry. I get another failed again because I didn't save, so I always forget that save. Let me clear this, okay? This isn't clear, so it's going to run in PM test again. Our manager test should pass. So as you can see, all the 4 tests had passed because we created a constructor files for each test to pass the test or the code. That means that we successfully write the code for that test to pass. And now about refactoring, I already did the refactoring. If we're going to go to our employee test, there are another types or methods to write the methods that is called, like we're calling the class employee, and then prototype. This is another this is a method to execute also instruction associated with the class. So like prototype get name, and it's equal to function that, so we're going to return this name. But it's we don't need to just write this class employee many times here. So that's why they called it, like, we have this refactoring that we make the code more organized and readable. So, and as you can see here, get ID, so we can write also that function, just call that get ID. So no need to write this employee prototype get name that makes our code so long, but it is also working if you will use this employee prototype. But isn't it much nicer to just call the function and return the objects? So that is called refactoring. After you have written a test, like this called test-driven development, you have to write a test for a certain code and then write a constructor file for that code, for the test, and then refactor. So now we're going to put it again, just short, call that function get name, and that is called refactoring. And now as you can see here on our test, so now we have created or a file and function and code for our page. So now we're going to create or initialize an HTML page for this project, because our employer or our wants to see the information or the basic information of certain team. So now we're going to go to our index.js file, as I have here, and I am requiring again, I'm calling the file system in order for us to write on our terminal, and the inquirer, so that it will parse all the questions and will validate all the answers that the users will input on our terminal. And here I'm calling all the files associated with this project. And as you can see here, I have generate page, so I'm calling that page also to create some HTML page for me. And here I have created an array of questions for the manager, for the engineer, for the intern, or for the employee's information. And now we have to go to our terminal, run the node index, that means that we are targeting or executing our index.js file. That's a lot here. Okay, we're here. So net index, where I should be here. Okay, and as you can see, because we call the inquirer and we call the file system to write on our terminal, and the inquirer, it parse or it prompt the first question from an array of questions. So we are going to answer that so that we can put some information on our generated HTML page. So let me say Peter Brown, our manager, and this is the ID. Just created the ID 1234, and then this email address 567@yahoo.com. What's the manager office number? Let's say our office number. So, and now here there's a prompt that if you want to add more employees, so you can choose either you want to add engineer, or either you want to add intern, or either finish adding employees. So if you want to choose engineer, there will be asking some name and information again of that engineer. So what's the name of engineer? Let me say David Fortaleza. I just creating some random names. This was engineer ID TF 5654, and then let's say Dave 54@gmail.com. What's the engineer GitHub username? Let me say Dev. Just random. Say I want to add more so that my information about the employees is populated. So what you like to add more? Yes, I want to add more. Another engineer. Let me say we have LaSalle J1. I'm just creating GL 57. Lisa, let us say yahoo.com. So we have to answer questions so that our card or ID for that certain employee is complete. What is the engineer's GitHub username? Yes, I want to add, let me say I want to add intern, so we can just go to our intern and then enter, and then it will prompt you what's the name, the same as you notice from the employee file. We are asking for the name, for the ID and the email, and then the rest we are extending that file for the engineer, manager, and intern for additional information. So as you can see here, our engineer, it needs a GitHub username, but our managers is the office number, as we created some test to get that office number to add to the employee, to that name, email, and ID. So let's say our intern, let me say Almira Brown. What's Almira Brown? ID 021, email address almita@gmail.com. So what's the school? I can say UC Berkeley. And I want to add more so that I will populate my team. What is the intern name? So I'll say Juan Federicos. Then this ID name GF2347. Address Juan, say yahoo.com. And the school is Leyan University. It's University of the Philippines. I want to add more. Let's say I want to add more interns again. Ellen Santos. That's Ellen Santos. What's the name of see this ID name? Ellen Santos at yahoo.com. School, let's say University UP of Diliman. Okay, that's Philippines, as if you are wondering, because I came from Philippines. Let me say I forgot one engineer. I want to add more engineer. Let's see, who's our engineer? Tommy Hilary. I don't know that name. Tommy, it's 02020. Tommy at 64gmail.com. I'm writing it wrong. Okay, and the username, I'm just creating, and I want add more another intern. As you can see, I will say Jen Ibatuan, that's my friend. So let's say 36 Jen, let me see, yahoo.com. So intern school, what's the school? UST, Santo Tomas. Okay, now I don't want to add more. So if I say just the default answer, no, I'll just finish writing my information about my team. So if you hit enter, as you can see, on the terminal, it returned back all the information that we have inputted on every questions here, and that means that we have successfully generated a file in the previous project that I have created, generating a README file. So here also we have I have to create or generate a file that parse all the information about employees. So that means it's returned us. So now if we're going to the this, as you can see here, the index HTML was being generated. It appears. So it just pop up. That means we have successfully created the index HTML. And how it does happen? Here, I have initialized and I have a function here to generate an index HTML file for me, or a page template. As you can see here, I'm calling all the files that consist of all the codes and information to parse in the HTML file. And then I initialize a page template here, team members, that going to add to that XML files, index HTML. And here I have a function, the engineer HTML file, initialize section for the engineer HTML. And here, as you can see, I'm calling that function member name, so that the inputted name that the user will put will be written here. So this value, this function, I'm calling this member name, or these objects, actually these objects of that certain member will be written here or pass here. And as you can see, member, I'm calling the function member get role, so that the role of each member or that certain member will be written here. This is the value. So I have h2. So the value of h2 should be the name of that member or that employee. And the h3, the value will be the role of that employee or that member. So I initialize a card or ID card for each employee. So now we're going to visit the index.html file that we have generated. And here, as you can see, we're going to check this, all the answer that we have inputted. As you can see, I have generated a file here for the manager, and h2 value should be the name of that manager. As you can see, manager is Peter Brown, and then the role was being that's why I'm parsing, or I'm calling here the objects to be this value of the name and the role. So now if you want to see this, as you can see, ID PB123. So we have successfully also call those objects to parse in that certain section. Now we're going to check here David Portaliza. So now if we want to save this and check this, we have to right click and then open in the server so that we can see how this page looks like. And here you go. This is our generated index HTML or page for a team builders. As you can see here, our manager. So I add some CSS design. So our manager, I highlighted yellow, the role, and we will going to check our Visual Studio Code and our terminal, what we have inputted on that. So as you can see, Peter Brown, David Portalisa. You can see Joan Federicos here, and then Joan Federicos here. So we successfully parse all the objects for that certain class. So if you want to test this, go to my GitHub repository, clone that repository, run on your terminal or on your Visual Studio Code, and here you can see or test how the Jest is working. And that's all. Happy coding!